Have you ever had the sense that someone or something is watching you? Most people at some point in life have experienced this eerie feeling, and there's even a term for it, scopaesthesia, or the psychic staring effect. But is there anything to it? Is it a true form of extrasensory perception, or is it just a trick of the mind? Suppose you're sitting in the front row of a crowded lecture hall. You, being a straight-A student, shrug off any distraction and devote your undivided attention to your professor. A student seated 2 rows behind you is having a much harder time focusing, as your undeniable steamy hotness is most distracting in a long and boring lecture such as this. But if your eyes remain fixed on your professor in front of you, would you actually be able to sense the lustful gaze of your rear-view admirer behind you? This supposed psychic phenomenon was first explored in 1898 by psychologist Edward B. Titchener. After several of the students claimed to be able to feel when someone was watching them from behind, Titchener performed several experiments to test the validity of these claims. The bulk of his subjects were able to accurately predict whether or not someone was looking at them about 50% of the time. As his findings proved to be about as accurate as a coin toss, Titchener himself rejected the idea that scopaesthesia is a true psychic ability. He offered another explanation as to why some believe they can sense being watched by someone outside of their field of vision. If you believe someone behind you is watching you, whether or not there actually is anyone watching you, your natural reaction would be to look behind you to investigate your suspicion. If someone behind you notices you looking in their direction, their natural reaction might be to look back at you and wonder why you're looking at them. When eye contact is established, you might think you caught the person whose stare you felt, thus validating in your mind the authenticity of your psychic spidey sense. But the most likely scenario is that the person looking at you is only doing so because they were able to see you looking in their direction. This was the primary explanation Titchener gave for the so-called psychic staring effect. There was, however, one participant whose results were a bit harder to explain. A man suffering from cortical blindness was shown a series of various individuals in photographs. He was reported to accurately discern whether or not the individual in a given image was looking straight ahead at the camera. It certainly gave the appearance of a supernatural ability.
But here's the thing, you see, cortical blindness is a bit of a misnomer because it doesn't necessarily mean total blindness. If you suffer from cortical blindness, there may in fact be nothing wrong with your eyes whatsoever.
The total loss of vision does occur in some cases, but it more commonly leads to a partial loss of vision. Cortical blindness is actually caused by a problem within the visual cortex of the brain. It's located in the occipital lobe right in the back of your head. It's not your eyes that are no longer capable of receiving visual information. It's that your brain is no longer able to process and make sense of visual information. In cases where there is minimal damage to the visual cortex, the resulting partial cortical blindness will manifest as a blind field within an otherwise normal field of vision. As the visual cortex is responsible for the reception and interpretation of visual stimuli, those who suffer from this form of blindness should have no conscious awareness of anything within their blind field. Despite this, numerous individuals suffering from cortical blindness have shown compelling evidence to the contrary, that they may in fact have some degree of conscious awareness of what lies within their blind field. The term for this seemingly supernatural ability is blind sight. Though we don't fully understand how blind sight is possible, it's been theorized the brain registers more information from our eyes than we are able to consciously perceive. Either way, blind sight is not typically thought of as a truly supernatural ability. Nearly a century after Titchener's initial investigation into the so-called psychic staring effect, a second study was carried out by parapsychologist Rupert Sheldrake. In many ways, his results were quite similar to Titchener's findings. In both cases, the average participant gave the correct answer about half the time. However, Sheldrake claims that 2 of his participants were able to consistently predict whether or not they were being watched with a degree of accuracy far exceeding that of chance. Skeptics and believers alike were intrigued by the seemingly psychic duo reported by Sheldrake. Some interpret his findings as proof that scopaesthesia is a very real, albeit rare, psychic phenomenon. Others criticize his research for not using truly random patterns in his experiments, and dismiss his findings as nothing more than the result of poor methodology. So in conclusion, is scopaesthesia a real phenomenon? Well, that's kind of hard to say.
I'm fascinated by this idea of blind sight. Although that particular phenomenon seems to be pretty specific to sufferers of cortical blindness, and it's not necessarily the same thing as scopaesthesia. Now, I will be conducting a few experiments of my own down the road, but to end this video, what do I think? Is scopaesthesia a truly psychic ability? Well, for the time being, I'm leaning more toward no. But who knows, my opinion may change after I run these experiments. So stay tuned. Hey everyone, Drew here from MADCATMYSTERIES, and I hope you enjoyed the video you just watched. If you did, you can click on the subscribe button below. I'd appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.